Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Influence Experiment as we continue to learn how to invest our influence well. Well, today we are jumping back into our conversation of deconstruction of worldview. And so if you missed part one, I definitely recommend going back and listening to that one first before listening to part two, as that will really kind of bring it together of what we're talking about today. And so when we think about this idea of worldview, right, it's a very abstract concept that we want to unpack and understand more so, and how it impacts our lives. How does it maybe impact us more than we probably give credit to? What do we do with this idea of other worldviews and conflicting worldviews in our lives with the people that we can relate to? And so as we unpack part two, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the faith side of it, some of the moral relativism of it, and also what do we do with a person that we think may have a toxic or unhealthy worldview, and do we have a right to speak into that, and how do we process that well? And so I hope that you're ready. It's going to be another crazy intellectual ride as we jump into Deconstruction of Worldview Part 2.
Welcome to the Influence Experiment, where we seek to explore the art and the science of building influential capacity. Every month, we want to raise thought-provoking ideas of how you can be an investor of the influence you carry. If you're ready to journey with us, then it's time to experiment.
You know, as we continue on, right, we kind of unpack this idea of the art and the science, and we've unpacked more like this understanding of the two different sides of worldviews, of this like revelatory and this random naturalist side. What does absolute truth play in a role of the conversation of worldview? And if so, if it has a role, what role is that?
Well, there are underlying truth statements that we all believe. And when I say believe, I don't mean we religiously celebrate them in a theological statement. I mean, I believe this chair is going to hold me up. That's why I sat in it and never thought about it. It's a presupposition when I don't think about it. Okay. So one of the presuppositions that you see as an absolute truth, let's say in cultural Marxism, is that the central issue of mankind, the central problem he has, is that he is bound to a system that has left him unequal, and he needs to get emancipation from it. And that's just a kind of forethought. When you have people running around and overturning things, you're going, wait a minute, why are they doing this? Look, I want you to listen to this. This is from the website of Black Lives Matter. Okay. Mm-hmm. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another. We foster a queer affirming network. Now, to a naturalist, that says we're emancipating people. But to a person who's a Jesus follower, what we see is we are making up new rules to replace the rules of society that you put on us, with this notion that there's a God, and because there's a God, there's truth, and because there's truth, there's morality, and if you diverge from that morality, you're in effect walking in sin. Their biggest problem isn't depravity. Their biggest problem are chains that have to be thrown off. Mine is depravity. Mine says, yes, the chains have to be thrown off, but Jesus takes them off, and you can't get them off by some popular vote where we all vote right. In fact, I would say it this way. If you're really a Jesus follower, you believe that any room of any color or any class will screw up. They will basically beat up the people that are not them. Yep. Whether it's a church, or whether it's a culture, or whether it's a race or a class or a gender, our problem is depravity, in my view. And as a result, that means I'm broken inside. James said it this way: we fight each other outside because we have a fight going on inside. And we can't fix that fight with social legislation. That's why the ultimate truth, the absolute truth, if you're coming at it with depravity as your foundation, you're saying, all right, government can do some things, education can do some things, but you're going to have to be right with your creator to be right with your world. Yep. The naturalist is going to say, well, there's not a creator, but we need to throw off the chains of what appear to us to be something that's kind of holding you down. And that's why they wrote in Black Lives Matter, we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. Read biblical worldview there, because that's what they're trying to do. Now, what we're not saying on this podcast is that there was equity before and that there's not inequity that should be addressed. There absolutely is always going to be inequity. It's my belief that as long as there are sinners on the planet, you're going to have inequity. That's not an excuse not to actually make sure that we have fair housing. That's not an excuse to not make sure that we have fair access to benefits as a citizen. It's my point is, you're attacking this symptomatic problem over here, and I think the root problem is depravity.
No, and I can I wouldn't have been able to put words to that myself, but I can totally see how having an absolute truth perspective comes at the root of depravity, and as we understand worldview and how that like astronomically changes whether we have a depravity foundation or not, for sure. And so no, thank you for speaking into that. And so, like, for those who do ascribe to Christianity, how does being a follower of Jesus impact their worldview, or how should it impact their worldview?
Okay, if I'm a follower of Jesus, what that means is that Christianity is knowing, loving, and obeying the person of Jesus. It is founded as an ethic of love, and that means that I'm to love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and my neighbor as myself. So my communal understanding comes from my vertical one. My horizontal touching other people comes from my vertical one. That means that I'm supposed to look at everyone else on this journey through life with a compassionate eye, with a reflective sense. They're not enemies. Ideas can raise enmity, but people are not enemies. The guy with the opposite worldview is just a guy. Jesus was big on this. He didn't let them label the woman sinner. He made them label her woman that sinned, because everybody who is saying it is also people that sinned. So there's a leveling in my playing field because of my being a Jesus follower. The leveling is, look, we're all just a bunch of guys doing this, and we all essentially are screw-ups, which is why God had to send someone to take care of it. He sent Jesus because I can't do it. There should be a ring of compassion and humility that is deeply rooted in the sense of absolute truth in the scriptures. Because what the scriptures actually say are, you're deeply flawed and broken, and you're going to need a savior. In the Hebrew scriptures, it's buy a goat, you're going to need him. You know, in the New Testament, it's you need to understand there's a one-size-fits-all sacrifice called Messiah, but you need that blood to wash away your sins, or you will not make the finish line that you think you're going to make. So as a result, I think when we approach the world, I want to do it with compassion. I want to do it as one of its members. I think one of the things my generation did poorly is we stepped into it like, obviously we're right, and obviously you kids don't know how to do this, so we're going to speak to you with that tone. That doesn't work, first of all, and it's demeaning. I have a guy who lives near me who doesn't have any commitment to God or creation or anything like that. He's a lost man. And what I've tried to do is actually sit and say, tell me your story, engage me so that I can hear where you're going. And let's pretend that neither of us have cornered the market on truth. I'm not giving up anything from my stand in the scriptures. I'm not. I just don't have to shove it down people's throats. I can confidently come and say, I think I know where we came from, why we're here, and where we're going. I think he has a different view of that, but how do I practically reach him in love, with compassion, and talk? Let's have a dialogue that's real, without me saying, let me apologize for everything and give it all up. I'm not doing that. I'm simply saying, you know what? There is a logical way in which we can handle this, and a compassionate way in which we can deal with one another as human beings. I think that's really one of my great concerns, is that when we deal with absolute truth and we deal with being a follower of Jesus, we can come off in a very negative way when what we have is wonderful. We have this magnificent relation. I can lay my head on my pillow at night and know I'm right with my Creator. And I think the longer that I've been a Christian, the harder it is for me to remember what it feels like when I don't know that. So I get a sense of like, everybody ought to just believe what I believe. But the problem with that is it's not kind, and it's not tender-hearted toward other people. And I think they read it. I think if you're going to be a Jesus follower, how about like this? If I'm a Christ follower, I actually follow Christ, and I look at how did he handle people. He never gave up truth in the Gospels, ever. But he also looked at people who were broken, grabbed them by the hand, and talked to them eye to eye instead of down to them. Look, he's out on a hillside in Galilee, and he's the only perfect one there. Everybody else is a screw up. So how is he not annoyed? And I think Christianity that comes off as annoyed is not Jesus-centered Christianity. I guess that would be my best answer.
And I think that's incredibly profound to kind of encapsulate it with that thought of someone who is not kind, or another bigger word, this idea of like incarnational, like ministry of like being the person of Jesus, the character of Jesus to the people around you, and how is that? I think that directly is how it impacts our worldview. Because when we look at the person of Jesus and how it's loving, tenderhearted, and you threw some incredibly wise comments and counsel even in that of how we can do that more effectively. And so thank you for that. And even as we look around as Jesus followers, we see an age of moral relativism of what's good for you is good for you, what's good for me is good for me. Like, how does a Christ follower balance living out of conviction while also not being a steamroller and inconsiderate?
Yeah, there's two words that come to mind that I think I'm going to hang this on: faith and love. So in a world that's morally relative, faith for me is God glasses. It's seeing it the way God says it is, and I'm speaking as a Christian now, speaking it the way the God of the Bible says it is, not the way my eyes would see it if I didn't look through a biblical worldview. So my worldview is conditioned entirely on what God says is true. And I'm asking your listeners to take into account that I'm coming at this as a Christian. Now, having said that, love in the Bible is acting deliberately to meet a need because there's a need, expecting nothing in return. The idea is God so loved the world doesn't mean he looked down there and said, oh, they're so cute, let me go down there and help. It was, I'm going to meet their need because they can't get there without me doing it for them. The mom who wakes up at 3 a.m. with the baby crying is getting up to feed the baby because the baby has a need. The baby's not going to say, thanks, Mom, I'm really fulfilled now, I'll go back to sleep. All you get is the burp. That's it. There's nothing else coming. So, but acting deliberately to meet a need because there's a need, expecting nothing in return. So if I do that in a world that's morally relative, I can love people without them even knowing that's what I'm doing. I can be courteous, kind, compassionate in the way that I'm dealing with people. I can be courteous on the road driving when you don't even have the ability to talk to me. I can have a courtesy that demonstrates a love. I can stop and care for people on the road. I can feed people. I can do many things that maybe no one will ever say that was his Christian witness because they don't see it. Sure. I serve an audience of one who sees everything. So the bottom line is, when I'm living in this morally relative world, my kindness matters. People do not care what you know until they know you care about them. That's the bottom line. And if I can project caring first, then when I speak, it's as a person who actually showed up and cared for them. And now I've got some cred to build on. I can start with a reputation and testimony of I'm a good guy. Now, I want to say something, Tony. I don't believe that you do those things always just to get a testimony, to get a sale. You love because you have the privilege of loving, because God put me in a world with people. And whether the guy at the brewery down the street here, whether, I'm out here in the mountains, so we've got breweries everywhere, whether that guy down there at the brewery knows Jesus or cares about what I care about, he deserves love by virtue of being created by my Father. He deserves kindness. And so when I engage him anywhere in the society, I'm going to engage him in that way. If I don't if I don't come off cold and hard, it's not just to get him to come to Jesus. It's because he's him. It's because he is him and he deserves that from me. And what I found is, particularly now, my platform gets bigger and bigger and bigger to speak into the lives of people because they know I have a commitment. I had a guy yesterday saying to me, you know God, right? like it was something weird, you know? And so he says, can you tell me this? People are willing to hear you, but they need our voices to come out and be people and be human and be compassionate. And if we'll do that and care for hurting people, the platform just grows bigger and bigger people that just want to know about your Jesus.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And like, I love the sentiment and statement to say like, like people don't care what you know until they know that you care about them. And I just think that's I think it's something we need to keep reminding ourselves of as Jesus followers, as we kind of do this dance of being citizens of two kingdoms right now. And so, so other things to kind of keep conscientious about us here, like what are some pitfalls to avoid when it comes to deconstructing worldviews?
I think the biggest one is people are to be loved. Ideas are to be challenged. When I challenge ideas, I don't want to demean people. So I quoted a couple of things from Black Lives Matter. Okay. I'm not on some campaign against them. I'm really not. That's not it. It's that what they're saying comes from a context. You have to know their context and they're telling you what it is. But if it's like, if it's like the Peanuts commercial when the adults speak, wah, 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 like if you're not hearing what they're saying, then you don't understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to deconstruct a Judeo-Christian morality in order to get emancipation for people. Well, I think slavery was a horrifying idea. I grew up in a multiracial family, and I think the idea that somebody's skin color has something to do with their intelligence is the stupidest idea of humanity. But the fact of the matter is, I don't want to bulldoze the foundations of Judeo-Christian thinking in my society in order to get that result. I just want to elevate people to a level where we're all looking eye to eye and not talking down to each other. That's what I'm trying to do. So we may both see the need, but we're addressing it from two entirely different foundations. So here's the pitfall. What I do is I come in and I find some Christians that are just dissing and attacking without stating, wait a minute, there's a piece of this that what they're trying to do is actually okay. What they're trying to do is not okay. It's right. It's moral. It's something God would tell me to do. The elevation of other people so that I'm looking at them eyeball to eyeball and not looking down at them or thinking they're less because they believe differently, look differently, act differently. That's not a God thing. Now, in exchange for that, the pitfall then becomes my language, the way I handle it. And I think that fundamental idea that I opened with, there are agendas that need to be challenged because those are ideas, but always in a sense that I'm respecting another human being and people are to love, ideas are to challenge. When I find myself challenging people, now I'm actually getting personal. Now I'm picking on your blood type, shoe size, and I'm messing with stuff that you're going, wait a minute, whoa. Now, one caveat to that. People can frame this is who I am differently than the Bible and marry an idea into their identity. And this is going on all across our society. Not only is it dangerous, it's fundamentally wrong. Who I am is not what I do. Those are two different things. My behaviors are not my identity. And as a result, what's happening is when people are taking desires and behaviors and turning them into identity, what they're doing is making it impossible to deal with the issue without feeling like you're attacking them. And that's because they're misframing identity. I am a human male. That's what I am. And the fact of the matter is that everything I believe and do may come out of that, but I can't incorporate my identity out of my choices, out of my behaviors, out of my desires, or out of my proclivities. And we have to separate those two. It's getting harder when they're defining themselves in one complete box. But we have to do that. Otherwise, what Jesus did by saying, no, she's not a sinner, she's a woman that sinned, is wrong. We should label people, and they should live their labels if we do it that wrong way. This is the reason why someone will come to me and they'll say, you know, my brother's gay. I'll say, no, he's not. Yes, he is. No, he's not. He may self-identify as a person that has certain desires. We can accept that. But your brother is a person. That's what he is. He's not a gay. He's a person. And his desires and his behaviors cannot and do not define him. And if I, as a Christian, allow him to define himself that way, I now cannot challenge his ideas without challenging his person. And that destroys the ability of the gospel to reach him. And that, I believe, is what the end game is there. So we don't allow behaviors to become identities. The last thing I'll say is the pitfall is to be very, very careful that we understand where things are coming from so that we can address them to the right point. Because the right answer to the wrong question is as bad as the wrong answer to the right one.
No, absolutely. And you picked apart here something I think really needed to be, which was the idea that we love people, we challenge ideas, or that my idea is not my identity. And many times, there's been times I sit in a room and we're having a staff meeting, and my idea is shot down, and all of a sudden I'm tempted to feel offended because oh, you don't like my idea, you don't like me. Right. And we have this a very Western mindset that we have around this, oh, if you don't like my idea or what I like or dislike, you definitively don't like me as a person. And separating the two out, I think, is really, really vital to understand as we understand worldview more so, and how that and even a pitfall to avoid. And so thank you for eloquently speaking into that. Here's a practical question for us here is if a friend or a loved one has a seemingly unhealthy or toxic worldview, how could one go about trying to tactfully challenge them on their view?
Well, where I get this the most is with parents who are dealing with, let's say, college-age children. They're coming back with this kind of definite statements of life. And I keep saying to them, all right, first of all, don't react, because when you react, you are almost certainly in your worst frame of mind for loving communication. And second, remember that if they're at that age, they're testing theories. That's what they're doing. And there's nothing wrong with testing theories. We all did it. There's probably 5 ways you did things on your house that you would never do them again now that you've done them and it was totally the wrong thing. But instead of being defensive, be prayerful. I mean, again, I'm going to answer this as a Jesus follower, and not all of your listeners are going to understand or latch onto this, but my feeling is this. If I believe there's a God in heaven, and I believe he has been merciful and gracious to me, and I do, I have to come back to, all right, my first communication has got to be with him. What can I do, Father, to represent you well in this case? Because even if it's my child, he loves them more than I do and loved them before I did, and knows them on a subatomic level. Okay, he knows everything about them and still loves them. So why am I acting like I have to bring them to him and he doesn't love them or know them? He knows them well. Start with, all right, if I'm going to deal with a toxic worldview, I'm going to have to deal with it in love. So I'm going to need to put on a certain attitude that is in the Savior, where I put myself second and I listen to that person. The second thing I found is really helpful is most times people echo something out loud because something's going on underneath. Often they'll say something that's toxic because what they're saying is, I'm deeply in pain, or I have this thorn in my foot. I have a brother who's severely autistic. And what's amazing about Devin is he's this wonderful guy, 30 years old. He's a wonderful guy, African-American kid, came and drug addicted. My parents adopted him. He's this great guy, but he says something and has nothing to do with what he's really thinking. And my mom knows his language. So he'll say, Mom, is it ugly? Mom, is it ugly? And she's saying, would somebody get him something to eat? He's hungry. I can't connect it because I can't hear what's beneath it. I think often when someone comes to me with something that's hard or harsh, usually there's one of 2 derivations, pain or fear. So I ask, what are they afraid of? or where's the pain coming from? And if I can get to that, then here's how I respond. I don't respond to their outrageous statement on Facebook or whatever. I respond to their pain or their fear and start saying, it sounds like you're really deeply concerned that this thing's going off track and about to explode. Can I bring you back to the fact that there's a God in heaven? And if you really have the faith that you say you do as a Christian, you can embrace him. He has never lost control, and you've never been in control. Control for you is an illusion, and it's an absolute reality for him. So relax for a minute. Let's just talk about what you're feeling and see if we can't get it back there. The pain was a lot harder. And to be honest with you, my brother's a psychologist. I'm just an archaeology pastor, so he's able to like pierce the veil of pain and really go, okay, here's what's going on here. And I think if we can connect this back and walk you back through it, we can reduce this level of pain, and then you'll be able to respond better. I just want people with unhealthy and toxic worldviews to gain to get us to understand them and then get us to walk them through it. They're stuck in a mud that we can help them get out of, but you're never going to fix a problem until you understand where it's coming from. And if it's fear or pain, you need to address those.
No, I love that you, again, diagnostic analytical questions or thoughts like, where's that coming from? It's either like fear or pain, and how can you address those two more pragmatically than just kind of addressing what's the fruit rather than the root of the issue. Let's kind of attack the root of the issue rather than the fruit of it. And so, no, that's super, super good and good advice to listen to. What resources, books, videos, articles, could you recommend that people could dive into if they wanted to take further studying and learning on this topic?
Yeah, I mentioned Truman's book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. Tom Holland wrote Dominion. These are books. I mean, what's interesting. The reason I'm mentioning these is everybody goes to if you're a biblicist or a person with a Jesus follower, you may be inclined to go to big Christian names. These are not big Christian names. These are guys, I'm not saying they're not Christians. I don't know them well enough to know, but they're names of people who have spent real cognitive time pushing around big ideas about how did we get where we are in this worldview and where's the conflict hitting us. And when you do the bigger work, Dominion, and you kind of work with Tom Holland on that, you get real help in cognitively understanding. So you get some ground to stand on. I have verses. I taught all the way through the 1189 chapters of the Bible 20 times, 20 years in a row. I do Bible. But I also need to understand, I have to exegete my world. And I need to understand a little bit of where they're coming from in order for me to be able to make sure that we're connecting. Otherwise, they're making new definitions. I'm talking family, but what they think a family is different than the biblical model. Okay. Yep. I like Al Mohler. I happen to think his podcasts his interview podcasts are some of the most intelligent that I hear. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you're not an Al Mohler fan, you probably don't know that I have to go back and take a dictionary and look up words sometimes to figure out what did they just say. It sounded brilliant, but I have no idea what it was. And so I go back and bulldoze it. I like, for maybe the next tier down in terms of the dictionary and words, I like Sean McDowell. I think he's interviewing people, and because he's closer to your age than mine, he's going to be, I think he's going to have a language that actually is a little bit more embracing, a little bit easier. Mohler's going to come from my generation. Sean's going to come from closer to yours. And what you're going to find is they're going to speak in very, very succinct terms. Well thought out. I mean, most of them are well thought out. There's always the podcast you skip, but most of them are really well thought out. And they've really helped me kind of up my game in trying to know who's out there writing about this. How do I embrace concepts well so that I'm understanding exactly what I'm doing? I think those are worthwhile.
No, that's great. And so if I heard you right, Tom Holland's book, Dominion, Truman's book on the rise and triumph of the modern self, and then Al Mohler's podcast and Sean McDowell's podcast. And so definitely encourage listeners to go and check out those resources for sure. And so, Randy, as we kind of like land the plane of this whole conversation of worldview and deconstruction, like any final words of wisdom or advice that you haven't said already that you would like to give to our listeners and viewers?
Sure. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to do this. It's been a lot of fun. For me, I have fewer days ahead of me than I have behind me. And that doesn't scare me at all. In fact, it's been a delight. I have seen greater things. I'm still a guy who believes that the best things to be created are in the next generation, not in mine. I work with 20-somethings. They're the most dynamic, wonderful group of people. And they challenge me all the time. They're not stupid. They're not unenergetic. They're not all these things I read about millennials and all these different. They are incredibly dynamic people. And what I try to say is what, Solomon said in Ecclesiastes, that from the beginning determine the end. Remember your creator in the days of your youth. In other words, when you're going to start, look at the road up there and know that you're going to get to the end of that road faster than you think. Because, life is fast and death is certain. You don't know anybody who's 212 years old, and there's a good reason for that. And so knowing that, if the Bible's true, if it is in fact appointed unto man once to die and then the judgment, I need to ask now, where am I going? What am I doing? And I don't want to simply have a happy ride to a terrible eternity, okay? What I'd like to do is go, how can I walk in intimacy with my creator now so that when I step out of this life and fall across the tape, I fall into his arms? One of the biggest problems with Christians is they still talk about heaven like it's gold streets. You're dead. What do you need gold for? That doesn't even make sense. The point of heaven for me is an unending, intimate relationship with God. Well, I can start that right now. I don't have to wait till I die. I can actually right now begin. So here's my 2 words for you. My day begins with invitation. Lord, I invite you to lead me through the day. And I just keep remembering God loves to dance, but only when he leads. Okay, this is very Christian. Okay, it's very Christian. The end of my day is my 2nd word. Invitation, end of the day, inspection. Not military, intimate. God, how's my thinking? How's my love for my wife? Am I being the father and grandfather I should be? Am I being a good guy in the community? Am I speaking truth always in love? Inspect my heart, know who I am, because I'm going to get better tomorrow if I hear from your inspection comments today. Or, as companies like to say, your feedback matters, right? So I say, God, give me your feedback. Where am I at? And you would be surprised if you start your day inviting him and you end your day asking him to inspect how you did, how much that puts hands and feet on what does it mean to walk with Jesus. And that for me would be my big piece of advice.
I think that's a profound way to conclude here, where you, under the banner of intimacy with God, you said start with invitation at the beginning of a day and end with inspection. And I just think that's really it's really good. I'm going to steal that actually, if that's okay. And so I love it. Well, Randy, thank you so much for joining us today, for unpacking this. Like we covered a lot of ground, a lot of territory. And I myself might have to go back and listen to this a couple of times in order to even fully glean from the wisdom and depth of what you've shared. And so just thank you so much. It's clear how much you are passionate about this topic, and that even the fact that you invest into 20-somethings college age students is incredible. And I just want to say thank you for the way that you invest so well and selflessly into the 20-somethings, into me, into other people that you intentionally come in contact with. So just thank you so much for being with us today and the influence that you have.
Thanks, Tony, for the opportunity to see you and talk to you. It's been a joy, and this is a topic that I think deserves the attention.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And so just thank you so much. And if you're listening to this and you are liking and hear what you're hearing and listening to, would you give us a rating or hit the share button wherever you consume the content? And so we hope that you'll join us next time as we continue to explore the art and science of building influential capacity. Catch you next time.